Welcome to the Flower Lounge, a place for conversations with wildly creative people and a little plant-loving wisdom to help you experience life in full bloom. I'm Katie Hess, flower alchemist and founder of LOTUSWEI, and I believe in a world where we're all living at our personal edge. Welcome to the Flower Lounge. I am super excited about today's guest. She's a dear friend, and we've been talking recently about how to make ourselves available for the younger generation, to offer some life experience and wisdom to encourage young girls. And so we thought about having an episode where we would talk about that. So let me give you a little bit about her background. Carrie-Anne Moss is an actress, mother, wife, and owner of Annapurna Living. Though she's blessed with her work, it is her marriage and family that are her deepest callings and have brought Carrie-Anne the greatest joy. As a mother and wife, she is able to embody her true self and to engage in her most authentic work in this life. Carrie-Anne is a student and teacher of Kundalini Yoga, a technology that has changed her life and that she feels compelled to share. Her Kundalini practice has given her a remarkable freedom through discipline that enables her to live a life of satisfaction and nourishment. Annapurna Living is Carrie-Anne's call to the modern woman to join her on this journey toward connection to the self and to our surroundings. So please help me welcome Carrie-Anne Moss.
Information coming at you. I can't even imagine being a kid. And I think a lot of the kids are dealing with a lot of anxiety and a lot of stress, and they don't even know why. And part of it is having a device in their hand all the time and their brain going so quickly. And, I wrote something recently about the fact that I don't move as quick as an email or a text. And yet I feel like, I feel like I should, or it's hard to distinguish, where you are and where that rapid way of doing things.
Yeah, I know. I was just in New Mexico for a couple of days and there was no cell service. And so there was no GPS. And the amount of times we got lost and then we couldn't, it was like, well, how do we call the person to let them know? It was like, how did we survive back then without all of these devices? And it's hard to even imagine a world where that doesn't exist. And yet, that's how we grew up. Those things weren't around.
Yeah, the evolution is, we're watching such a rapid rate of evolution right now. Mm-hmm. And when I first moved to LA, so 25 years ago, I had a Thomas map, which was this book with addresses. And that's how I got to auditions. And I had a cell phone that barely worked and definitely never texted. I didn't text until, I would say, like 9 years ago, 10 years ago. Mm-hmm. I didn't know why would you text? Now I have friendships that are only on text, mostly moms who don't want to, be on the phone in front of their kids. Although we're kidding ourselves by not understanding how distracting it is to be on a text, and in another alternative universe, being on a text, you're not where you are somewhere else. But, as long as I continue to think about it being different and not liking it, the less likely I am to create a bridge to understand it. And I think that the younger, women I see around, my neighborhood, and granted, I live in a big city and a pretty fast, growing, like it's kind of a quicker vibration probably than most cities, living in Los Angeles. I think that the young people are looking for what we were always looking for as young people too. And we are still looking for, which is, where do I fit in and who are my people? Mm-hmm. And, finding who your people are is the key to living a life that feels good.
Oh my God.
And when you're young, it's hard to know that, hard to figure that out.
Oh yeah. I remember the feeling of walking down that long hallway, like through the lockers, and there'd be people sitting on the sides of the hallway and you could walk in front of everyone. And it was always this sort of like everyone watching everyone, and what are you wearing? And do you fit in? And of course I never fit in. Like my entire growing up, I never, ever felt like I fit in. And I think that's, like, you totally hit it on the head. We continue to do that in our adult years, is really trying to refine who it is that we are and surround ourselves with people that are like us as well and have the same aspirations. Do you have any experiences that you remember like viscerally?
Well, I remember when I was in 8th grade, like having a very close group of girlfriends and changing schools. In Canada, you go into like a junior high school in 8th grade. And I remember losing all of my friends because they knew that I didn't want to smoke pot. And they didn't really come out and say that, but they just stopped being my friends. And because I was kind of straight and, I wasn't really all that I wasn't interested in that kind of thing. And it was very painful to lose them. And yet I'm so grateful it went down like that. Mm-hmm. And when I look at, I ended up making new friends and I ended up going down, finding new people. But I did have to go through the grieving and the pain of it. And I really didn't understand it. It just felt like I wasn't enough or they didn't like me. Mm-hmm. I can see clearly why now, but at that age, it just felt like rejection. But, I made it through. And I think that's the thing, is that we are resilient and we get through things. And I never really fit in. I was always kind of popular, but I was never like in a particular group. I really kind of hung out with lots of different kinds of people, which I think was a blessing for me. Mm-hmm. And, sadly, or just how it is, I'm, friends with 2 people I went to school with. Mm-hmm. And that's the reality for most people, is these people that you're spending these important, time of your life, you may not know them later. And so it's like knowing who you are as you're becoming who you are. How do you do that? And I'm not saying I have the answer to that, but I certainly feel like having mentors and having grownups that you trust and that have your best interest at heart, or that you can look up to. I mean, I had that with my mom because we were close that way, but not everybody's going to have that with their parents. So it's like creating, I've been in the town that I live in, I keep wanting to create a little class, like a Kundalini Yoga class for teenagers. I don't know if anybody would come or not, but I want to, because it just feels like they don't have anywhere to go.
I think that kids definitely need adults that aren't their parents. I remember my uncle married a woman when I was in high school, and she had a tremendous impact on how I grew up. She was teaching me things about Reiki and energy healing and really interesting forms of music and natural medicine. I would have had no contact with that kind of thing. It really opened up my eyes at that age. And it was almost like having an anchor. It was like, knowing someone who was older and female that I could look up to, that wasn't my parents, someone who had wisdom, that was like an anchor for me. And yeah, I think having a yoga class would be great.
Yeah, I'm thinking about it. I'm not sure how to make that happen, or, I don't know. Because it's interesting because it's different now, because a lot of us have been exposed to in my circle anyway, like a lot of us are all into yoga and all of that. And it's funny how the kids are kind of rejecting that, right? They're like, oh, I don't want to do that. Like, I would have loved that too when I was younger. I would have been so excited about it. I think it's just really forming connection, right? It's forming connection. And how do you do that? And how do we, I always look at, there's a great book called The Continuum Concept that I read before I had kids. And it's a lot about attachment parenting, which is something that I was very interested in when I first had my kids, and just really successful family structures. And they look at tribal living as an example, and different groups of people that have like happy families. And it's, people that are, they have community, and there's a baby on the hip, and the baby comes along and is part of, and the teenager is valued and a part of, and the older person is part of the community and respected and part of, and everyone in it is together.
Right.
And we don't have that anymore. So everyone is so separated. It's like the teens are there and the little ones are there and the grownups are there. And it's like bringing more community and connection back. Mm-hmm. And how do you do that? It's like great idea, but how do you do that? And I think, I know for myself that I'm craving that too, for myself, to be in community, to have community dinners with families and children of all ages. And we, I try to do it, and then it's like life happens, and it's been a year,
What do you see happening in your kids' lives that strikes you as interesting or different or surprising?
Well, I think technology is definitely the most challenging aspect for me to watch.
Mm-hmm.
And I say that knowing that I am as addicted to technology as my teenager is. It's not like it's separate. It's just harder to see it on someone younger, but it's a reflection of me. So I get that. So I think that's really tricky. I think we need to be educated. I mean, my kids missed the wave of kids with devices in their hands as babies, like, thank God. But there's a lot of people that don't have the information that's not, it's not meant to be in a baby's hands.
Right.
And yet you see it all the time. And, you might as well be handing them, and people are not going to like this, but you might as well hand them a cigarette. I mean, it's unhealthy, it's toxic, it's addiction, and it's like they don't have a choice. And we're making these decisions for our kids. But that is the reality for a lot of people. And it makes car rides easier, or they can go grocery shopping. But it's affecting so many layers of stuff that I can't even begin to, I'm pretty passionate about that. And at the same time, I have to not judge and not worry too much, because it's not good for me. Mm-hmm. But you walk around. I drove my son to school the other day, to the bus stop. And as I drove back, and all the kids waiting for their buses, and they're all like this, down on their phones, and all the grownups are like this. And,
wow.
we're all checking out, thinking that we're checking in. Right.
Right. And feeling isolated or lonely,
and we wonder why we're depressed and have anxiety and can't sleep at night. And, it's an epidemic of dysfunction.
Yeah, even just the motion of looking down all the time, right? We're not seeing each other, or like nature and the trees and the leaves and the breeze and the sunshine.
And there's got to be a balance. Unfortunately, it's hard to have a balance with something that's that addictive.
Right.
So it's like we can say for days how important it is to have balance, but we're asking, we can barely balance it, let alone a teenage mind that it is wired to want to do that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I always have this image lately of, like, in the movies when, like extraterrestrials with their eyes slanted a certain way, the eyes have a certain direction in the skull. And I was like, we're eventually going to look like that because of the adaptation to using a device all the time. It's going to change our bodies, right? I mean, I'm talking to chiropractors who are saying, kids are coming with, like, their backs are curving over.
Oh my God.
So it's like we're evolving physically already. Our minds are changing. And so much of it, I mean, I know there's so much good in it, right? There's so many wonderful things that we're doing this together. I mean, it's not like making it all bad, but I'm just not sure. I'm not sure how this is going to end good. Mm-hmm. I hope, fingers crossed.
So what do you do to push back? Like, what works for you personally? Just like, what do you do to push back?
Well, I took the summer and I took Instagram off my phone, for instance. That was huge for me. And it was really nice not to be in the know. Because what is there really to be in the know about? Like, if you have something that you really wanted to share with me, you'll text me, or what counts will come to me. Mm-hmm. And it's amazing how many people expect you just to watch them on social media. Even friends, you didn't know that this happened to me. And I'm like, I'm not on Instagram anymore. And they're like, and people like didn't really believe that I really wasn't on it, but I took it off, and it was such a relief, because I tend to go to it when I'm bored or waiting or have a moment, mm-hmm. instead of being in the silence. I mean, I think you have to have, really, really clear boundaries around it. Mm-hmm. And it's hard to do that. But I think that that's the starting place. Is it goes off at this time. And I know people who are really good at it. It's really hard for me because I do a lot of work on it. My kids, my son is texting me, he needs to get picked up or whatever. And, but then I can say that, but I'd say 80% of what I do on there isn't needed. I could do without. So it's getting honest, about that. So I think that technology is a challenge for these guys. I think, for the girls, what we're talking about is within technology is this constant comparing themselves to what other people's lives look like. I was reading something, or somebody told me, it might've been Maya who told me this, that what social media did for women and girls was made them feel like other life envy, like other people's lives are better. Right. And that's something that, whereas men and boys, it's more toward video games and that kind of craving. But for girls and women, it was more like, and it's funny because who I follow or like who I'm interested in on social media are people who are really living their lives authentically. I'm not really interested in anything that looks too shiny. Mm-hmm. I don't buy it. So not to say I don't want to see beauty and all of that and be inspired by beauty. I think beauty is beautiful and I need it. I need that jolt of inspiration for a beautiful altar or someone's office space or whatever. Right. But it all lies inside us, and it's like, is what you're doing adding to that voice of knowing that and that it's all within you, or is it making you continually look outside of yourself mm-hmm. to see who you are and how you're living your life? And I think when you're 13 or 14, you're already looking outside of yourself.
Well, I think that's a good method that could be put into place for all of us of any age. That little extra layer of awareness as we're on social media to say like, okay, is this making me feel good or not? Is this adding value or not? And actually being able to look at your phone, but also be able to tune in with your body's system and your mind and feel the effects that being on your phone all the time is having on you. Are they positive or not? And when you feel those envious feelings, like, why isn't my life like that? Just feeling the exhaustion of it, then we'd have the awareness to be able to pull back from that.
Yeah, it's like it's the warning signal. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was talking about that today on a call that I had about like when that voice comes in that says I'm not enough, or you start feeling like you're doing it wrong, that's a warning signal. It's not the truth, but it's telling you that whatever you're thinking or doing isn't really good for you.
Right. Yeah. I was going to ask you, what's something that you might have told your younger self, or that you would tell your younger self? Like, what's a piece of advice? Or
I'm pretty in awe of my younger self, to be honest. Yeah. So I think I can learn a lot from her. And at the same time, it's like my growth has been so exponential that I don't even know when that happened. I don't even know when I didn't have these tools. Mm-hmm. It all has become kind of like it's not like black or white. Like I was like that. Now I'm like this. It's like, it's been such a journey of awakening for me. Right. But I guess, the kinds of things, the kinds of touchstones or like mantras or bumper stickers that have helped me on the day to day. And mm-hmm. that probably would have really come in handy when I was younger. And I think didn't come in for me till I was like in my late 20s, are things like, you're perfect with your imperfections. Mm-hmm. This too shall pass. And I think that's something that I've really gotten in the last few years, that I remember when I was younger, when I was a kid, you just feel like that feeling's never going to go away. And that thing that happened, that embarrassment that you felt, that you were going to feel that forever. But I also understand that the only reason I can feel that now is because I've been through it enough times to know that's the truth. So you have to experience it. So every experience that has been difficult or hard, so here I am talking to the younger me, will be medicine one day, and will be your greatest teachers, and will be the reason why you can be supportive to someone who's going through something. I always felt that, like when I started my awakening, when I looked at certain things that happened in my childhood that were challenging or difficult, I really understood that I had that medicine to help other people. That's how I was able to be okay and trust that I could handle what I'd been dealt, and that I would use that as part of my supporting other people, because you can't support people with, if you haven't been through anything. I mean, no one's going to go through life not going through things.
Right. And I think as I get older too, I feel like every time I have a heartbreak or something really challenging, it's almost like I can feel it changing me on the inside, like the alchemy of that transformational process. Or I think when I was younger, it was just kind of all consuming emotion. And I don't know if I could, take a step back from that. Whereas as I get older, I feel like every hardship literally sort of like alters the molecules in my body in a really positive way, so that you see the other side of that coin. So it's not just all anguish. You see that there's, with that little piece of anguish comes this incredible maturity or wisdom or clarity that maybe you didn't have before or didn't quite see before.
Yeah. And I think just knowing that that's possible, like even if you can't feel it as a teenager, it's like knowing that, like hearing that and just trusting that when you are in it is really helpful. That's why I often looked to, stories of people who I respected for pieces of wisdom, because I would just hold on to that wisdom of like, okay, I'm going to believe this person, or I'm going to believe that when it's really hard to believe. I remember having like a bit of heartache in my 20s, and I remember like never having really felt that particular kind of heartbreak. And my friend, I was sitting there and I was crying. I was like, I've never had this. And she said, well, welcome to being a woman. And I was like, oh, you're not going to go through life never having your heart broken, never being rejected, never being hurt, never, we all, and I think that's the thing too, that I didn't know until I got older, was that everyone, no matter how much they look like they have their life together, is struggling and has moments in the dark nights of the soul. And I think what would have been really great for me if I had understood it. And maybe this is somehow something that I'll share if I do that class, is understanding the rhythm of the moon, which we talk a lot about, but understanding that as a young woman, you'd understand that there's a time for like that it's not just you, like there are forces bigger than you that are bringing emotion up and out so that you can let them go and then move on. And then there's times of the month that you feel more creative, and then times you want to stay in bed. And I mean, that's all normal and part of the dance of being female. And we aren't told that. And we are told to power through, and then we're, medicated for all of these things, or people try to, or people are, or whatever, trying to fix these things so they can be even. We're not meant to be even. That's not the experience of being a feminine lunar creature, as one of my teachers, Paramatma Siri Sadhana, talks about a lot. And I've learned a lot about that through her, but I didn't have any understanding of, I actually felt guilt as a young person for feeling different every day. Like I felt like I wasn't like a stand-up person because I had like a strong opinion one day, and then next week I didn't really care about it so much. Now I see like it's actually really normal and part of the magic.
Right. Everything's constantly changing.
And
yeah, I think that was something I realized in my 20s and 30s too, is that nobody ever teaches us what to do with really strong and intense emotions. Like, what do we do with those? And I think you brought up a really good point in terms of things coming up to come out. And if we knew, especially at a young age, that we could feel these intense emotions because something was being brought up and then they would be released, or that there were actually specific methods and tools and practices that could facilitate that, so that over time we would feel it less and less and less intensely. I think that, many of us grow up not knowing that there are actually real methods and tools that have been around for thousands of years, like meditation, for example, or mantras that are designed to uproot those specific types of suffering that are lodged within us.
Yeah. And when I remember being in a class with my teacher, Paramatma, and she was saying that she thinks women should break something every day, or that girls, she was saying girls, like, and I have, I have a young girl, and it's like there's so much intense emotion and so much joy, and it's always changing. And I think, my generation, because I'm older than you, it's like there was no room for your feelings. I mean, I'm only learning, and I just turned 50 this year. And this past year has been the year of my feelings, of like knowing that, because I have an emotional ability, I have the gift, I think, of being able to see the higher picture, to see the big picture, to see a higher way of looking at things. And I often spiritually dodge my feelings by going to, it was meant to be, and just using all of my tools, which are super great. But underneath it were all these feelings that I never, ever really allowed myself to feel. And at first, when I started to allow them to come up, I thought, oh, I'll cry forever. Like, will I ever stop crying? And the answer is yes, you will, but you've got to have room. And I think, surrounding yourself with people that can bear witness to that can be in that can be with you in that, and can also help you move on too, because you don't want to get stuck either. I mean, it's right. I'm older, and so I know who to go to, right? I know who to call when I need to have that session, Mm-hmm. But it's important, because if you don't get those feelings out, they're still there. Just because you're not getting them out doesn't mean that they're not there and affecting your health, affecting your relationships, projecting onto somebody else, whatever happened with so-and-so, like 2 years ago, yesterday, last week. Most of the time, I mean, I would never have understood this as a young person, but like most of the time, what you're upset about isn't what you're upset about at all. It's something much deeper and triggering something that is from a long time ago. And even if you're 14.
Right.
And it's like understanding that and having the right support. I think, when I was a kid, nobody went to therapy or counseling or anything like that. And then when people did start to do that, it was like, oh, only if you were really messed up and you were like embarrassed. And, now, there's so many different modalities of counseling, and I'm not into traditional things, but I like to have like mentors that I talk to, oh, that's my mentor in mothering, and that's my mentor in business. And that's just someone I talk to when I just need to just share, and I can be clear about what I need. Can you just listen to me for a minute, not try to fix it? And then, of course, I'm married, and so I have my husband, and I do that for each other,
Being able to speak out verbally what's happening and clarify through your own words what you need. Yeah, this year was really interesting for me too. I went through a lot of really intense heartbreak situations, and I was just curious, because still, even as an adult, it'll end, it will fade, you will feel better. But in the moment, it can be so intense. It just feels like it's going to last forever. So what are those things that you do in those really, really tough moments to sort of self-nourish, pause, and take care of yourself?
Well, I do Kundalini Yoga, which, there's lots of meditations in there that I will actually lean on if I'm really struggling with something, because often the thing that happens to me is it becomes difficult to sleep when I'm got something weighing on me.
Right.
And so really where I feel like my most growth has come around being able to drop the thinking before bed so that I can at least sleep. Because, a well-rested person has more clarity than a tired person, which, I'm not really succeeding at the last couple of nights. I just haven't not been sleeping deeply, not because I'm worried, but just, it's the moon, I'm sure, has an impact. And I've been drinking some really yummy elixirs, and maybe they're a little too stimulating, even though they're not caffeine. It might be too, I have to look at all of that, because I'm super clean with what I eat and drink and stuff. So it's like, if I'm not sleeping super well, I know that there's something that needs tweaking. So, and just having that mantra, this too shall pass. And, the thing about learning mantra, whether it is some words or if it's something more yogic, is that it pierces through those thoughts, so that those thoughts that are spiraling in the mind are pierced with that consistent, whatever it is. And so that rhythm of that cuts through. And that's been super helpful for me, because I could spend, days worried and in that cycle.
So when you talked about learning to just really feel your feelings and feel your emotions, do you sort of separate that from your thoughts? So like you might have, like all of us have all the thoughts going, and then there's also this field of emotions. How do you just feel your feelings? Like, how do you actually do that practice for yourself? Do you take a moment? Do you just go inside and feel it without engaging in the thoughts around it? Or what would you say to someone who's 15 and just really struggling with emotions? Like, how to feel those feelings so that it moves through more gracefully?
Journal. Journal. So if I'm having a lot of thinking about something, I'll write it down, because I know that underneath that is the truth, not what is going on in the mind. So I know that right away now. Like it's like, oh, that thought, what is it? What is underneath that? So I journal a lot, and I have every journal I've ever written in since I was 10.
Wow.
Since I got my, I have, when I got my period, written in a journal, in code. So my brother wouldn't know, And I have so many journals. I think that, writing is very, very healthy.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been a saving grace for me. And being creative is important. Finding what you can bring your creativity into, because, a lot of addiction and a lot of acting out comes from creativity not having a place to be expressed.
Mm-hmm.
And so whether or not you think you're an artist or not, it's like, where can you bring creativity to your life? Because we all are artists. When you start bringing that into your life starts to feel beautiful and much more fulfilling in simple ways.
Mm-hmm. And how do you do that? How do you engage your creativity muscle?
I draw in my journal. I'm not very good at drawing. I just color and draw and make shapes and doodle. And I used to do that in my notebooks when I was a kid. Like, if, I doodle all on the other side of the page.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're all just naturally really creative. Mm-hmm. So for some people, it might be planting a garden or getting their hands in the earth, or, knitting, or, trying stuff you think you would never like. Like, I'm not a very good knitter, but I know how to do just a simple stitch. And what I like about it, and, my mom's a really good knitter, and so she knows how to do like the whole pattern and all that. I like knitting because I cannot think. I can have my hands active and I don't have to think. And so I don't want to do a pattern. I don't care if what I finish looks great or not. Mm-hmm. It's actually just the action of having it on my lap and doing it.
Right.
I'm so not the example of a knitter, but I love doing it. It feels so good. It's like, make something, just get paints out and just do it. I mean, whether or not you're good at it or not, we all have that within us, to be creative. And it's really about being exposed to it. And, I try to do that with my kids and my boys. It's a little different now, but with my daughter, I just try to expose her to lots of stuff. And, so if you don't have money and, but you can, crayons and a big piece of paper, and you start doodling on one side, and then the kids are doing it, and you add to it and add to it and add to it. I have a painting in my daughter's room. It's a family painting where I just put it out and I said, everybody just add to it. And it's, it's a memory of that, of a time, but just trying to bring the creative into the mundane, I think, is one of the things I try to do. And I'm not always successful at it, but if you don't, then what are you waiting for? Like, mm-hmm. If you wait for special occasions to wear the velvet jacket or use the fancy dishes, then you're going to be doing it maybe once every few years. But if you just decide every day is that day, then you're like feeling decadent in your life in a way, and creative.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, creativity is such a great way to funnel all of those emotions as well.
Yeah, I loved when I came to your flower lounge, and I had this image because I think there's so little ritual for young people today. And I imagined how much teenage girls would love to understand what you're doing and have that ritual that you had us all doing a part of it. And I think it would be really, maybe you and I will have to do that together. It would be really wonderful to have a flower lounge and a little bit of a yoga class, something really simple. And you just geared towards the teenagers so they can have the experience of what you're doing.
Yeah, even I was thinking something as simple as, we don't need money to go out into the woods or go out into nature and assemble all of the beautiful pine cones or stones or leaves that we find or flower petals and then arrange them into a beautiful formation. Yeah, it's just something that you can, like you said, with your family, you can build it together. It's a cool, direct experience of knowing that you can build something with other people that is bigger and better than you could do just by yourself, that it comes out in this whole other form. It's not 1 + 1 is 2. It's like exponential. It's a nice way to sort of see it in 2 dimensions.
Yeah. And also though, just like the elixirs and understanding, like there's flower essences that can help you when you need grounding. And there's flower essences when you feel anxiety about a test. And, in a day and age where people are, tempted or pressured or expected to medicate themselves. There are alternatives that are holistic and healthy.
Yeah, and we see the world in a whole different way when we look around and knowing that like every single one of those almost 400,000 species of plants has a really specific benefit. And there's something out there for us. It's like having a whole team of like friends that are just waiting there to support us with whatever we've got going on.
Yeah, I had this image of nature the other day because I get worried about her, about Mother Earth. And then I was like, and I remember writing that once and somebody wrote, "Oh, don't worry, she's going to be fine. It's us that aren't going to be fine." And I remember just looking around and thinking like, it's so beautiful, like where I live. And when will it be enough? When will it be enough to stop building more, buying more? Like, when will we just understand that we can't actually sustain that level of growth? Like, there's not enough room. Mm-hmm. And if we all just decided to have ethical, incredible businesses, and we taught that in school about business models that were completely like good for everybody. Right. I mean, then we have a chance, and we have a really good chance. But as long as we continue down this road that none of us want to go down, except for maybe a couple people at the top who are making a lot of money, it's just so clear. Mm-hmm. And when you're a kid, when you're a teenager, and your brain is developing, you are being completely controlled by corporations to want to buy, to feel like you're not enough, so that you'll buy their products. And they're creating consumers, shoppers, out of teenagers who now have a phone in their hand and who can be marketed 24 hours a day. Mm-hmm. And that's terrifying. And, it goes back to the Matrix movie, like when you see those babies in the pod all plugged in, it's like, that's actually happening now. And, do you want to be awake or not? And it's a movie was made a long time ago, but it's never been more relevant, And if the parents aren't awake and don't understand what's going on, because, if the parents are still caught in that trap of looking outside of themselves and climbing the ladder to success and what that looks like, then how are the kids going to find their way? There's so much pressure on everybody to be better. And my husband's reading a book right now by a friend of ours named Jessica Leahy. And it's, she's talking about how, women, we've been in the workforce and now we're parenting our kids from that masculine workforce mode. scheduling and planning. And, yesterday I was taking my daughter to a class and I heard a mom go, "Your dinner's in the car," and to a little tiny kid. "Don't eat that now. Your teriyaki bowl is in the car." And because, most of us are all, rushing our kids from point A to point B, myself included, because you're filling in all these, kids, very few kids have time to just be. And now the pressure is even more, because if they have time to just be, the temptation to be on devices is even bigger, even if they're little. It's like you're constantly saying no.
I wonder if we could even sort of rewire our brains to say, even as just a reminder, that every time we reach for our phone, unless it's absolutely necessary, that maybe there's a way to use that to trigger a reminder to ourselves to turn back in toward ourselves, in a sense of like, I can go to this box for information and messages and meaning and beauty and visuals, or I can turn inward. And that there's this infinite wealth of beauty and messages and information and creativity and talent that's just waiting to be discovered on the inside. And almost like seeing the phone as like a trigger, a reminder to switch back in and think back on what might be on the inside. Listen to that little inner voice. I've been playing with this thing recently called Following the Golden Thread, where you have this tiny little voice that pops up and says, I'd like to go here, or I'd like to learn about this. And oftentimes it's so quiet that we just roll right over it and keep going. But to really have the curiosity to follow that and see where that leads us. Maybe what you're saying is often enough, we don't give ourselves enough time to do that, right?
Yeah, I think curiosity is amazing, but if you don't have time, it's hard to have it. Mm-hmm. It's happening to kids really little now too, or just being rushed to academics, where people are deciding that, having kids academically ready at an age when they really ought to be playing, not understanding the importance of that. I mean, this is, it's so deep and pervasive in our culture of
more play.
Yeah, we all do.
On that note, I want to do a little exercise to wrap up with you. It's really simple. So you just close your eyes. I'm going to close my eyes with you and go back to your childhood and think about a time when you played around flowers or plants or trees. And see if you can identify a favorite flower or plant. Just think about what you were doing at that time, who you were with. And then in your mind, see if you can find 3 words that describe the personality of this favorite flower or plant or tree. And then when you're ready, open your eyes. And if you could just share a little bit about what you were doing, what you thought of, what the flower was.
Yeah, I remember when I was little, I used to love to take flowers and make elixirs with them, and take my mom's old perfume bottles and fill them up with these things that I would make. And I would sometimes pour her perfume out. But I remember feeling like there was infinite possibility in doing that. Like I could make this. And I often used those little flowers, that little white flowers, with a little yellow in the middle, little tiny ones, but also dandelions, because we had so many dandelions. And the thing that I thought about with the dandelion that's so incredible is the dandelion is a weed, right? It's everywhere.
Right.
And you make a wish on it. And how it's so multifaceted, and how much I loved that as a kid. Like I didn't understand that it was a weed. And I remember when I heard it was a weed, it didn't really compute for me, because I didn't buy that. But I loved being able to, with my own hands, with nature, make something, make perfume. It's probably why I love what you're doing so much. And when I look at my friend Nadine Artemis, right, like you guys both, like I'm so attracted to what both of you are doing. I mean, I was doing that as a little girl. That's what I wanted. I felt that. And I didn't have a lemonade stand. I went selling them door to door.
Really?
Yes. I did have a lemonade stand too. And I was an entrepreneur, because I would set up my lemonade stands at construction sites and would make a lot of money as a young kid because they're thirsty.
Right. That's a good location is key there.
Location.
You had that nailed at a young age. And if you were to describe either the dandelion or that little white flower in 3 words, how would you describe it?
Powerful, delicate, and beautiful.
So typically what we find is that the words you use to describe the childhood flowers would embody how you bring your gifts into the world and how you are and your essence. Powerful, delicate, beautiful.
You make me cry.
I think we should get you making some infinite possibility wish making elixirs and potions.
Okay. How do I do it?
I think we should do some sort of retreat or something, or maybe get a bunch of women or girls together and do meditation and make some elixirs and potions and spend a day in nature.
I'd love that. And maybe what I can see 3 things. I always see things in 3s. Okay. Mother, daughter, young women, and women. Let's do it. I'm in.
Okay. Thank you so much for spending time with me today.
My pleasure. Thank you.
So I just want to thank you so much, Carrie-Anne, for being here with us on the Flower Lounge. And if anyone is interested in diving more deeply into Carrie-Anne's work, visit annapurnaliving.com. That's ANNAPURNA living.com. Thank you so much for listening to the Flower Lounge. I'm Katie Hess, and we'll be releasing a new podcast every Wednesday. If you like what you heard, or you know someone who might be touched by our conversation, share it with them. And don't forget to subscribe. To find out what your favorite flowers mean about you, take the quiz at LOTUSWEI.com.